For the next hour, you'll be leaving the Show Me state and entering the Show Me the Money state. So stop what you're doing, grab a pen, and get ready to learn. Randy and Jake Floyd of Floyd Financial Group will be your guides for straight talk and honest answers about living the life you deserve in retirement. So prepare to be empowered. Now, here are your Show Me the Money hosts, Randy Floyd, Jake Floyd, and Jeff Shade.
Good morning. Thank you so much. Welcome to Show Me the Money, the radio show that gives you the straight talk and honest answers you need to help you reach your wealth management and retirement goals through smart investing and careful planning. On today's show, we're going to be talking about current events, also the 5 pillars of a truly aligned financial plan. Happy birthday, Social Security. It is turning 90 years of age. We'll talk about what you need to know and also things to consider if you're planning on an early retirement. My name is Jeff Shade, and as always, I'm just here to ask the questions, but of course, the words of wisdom is solid advice. They come from Randy Floyd, Floyd Financial Group. Good morning, Randy. How you doing today?
I'm very well, Jeff. How about you?
I'm doing great, Randy. Thanks for asking. I hope everybody else is having a great weekend. We appreciate you joining us here for Show Me the Money. Jake is off this week, so Randy, I guess it's just you and me. We'll see if we can get through this today. We had a number of things come out this past week, but chief among them was the CPI. It's the Consumer Price Index. Now, that is different from the PPI. Can you explain the difference between Consumer Price Index and the PPI?
Sure thing. So the PPI is basically what producers of goods and services are experiencing versus the actual CPI, which is what we as consumers experience. And they're both, of course, closely tied together. It's always interesting to me, they typically show the CPI first, then the PPI later, right?
Right.
And so it's kind of like, let's see, you got your horse before your cart, and that's kind of hard, right? But anyway, the long and the short of it is, this past week, we did get CPI, and it came in a little bit lower and a little cooler than people thought it was going to, which basically is now going to feed Mr. Trump's fire to go ahead and get after Jerome Powell just a little bit more on cutting interest rates. So it's really worth saying here, the mandate for the Fed, the Federal Reserve Bank, and Jerome Powell, the guy that runs that show over there, is 2% inflation and maximum employment. Now, we've talked about this, that unemployment right now is running around 4.5%. So I think we're probably still near full employment. And with that being said, and at 2.7 annualized inflation, it's not quite where they want it to be, and news of more layoffs coming, I think it is time for the Fed to make an adjustment. I think the pressure's about right, and I think we've been seeing across the board, all the guys that track this sort of thing. There's people that project and ask people what they think the chances are of a rate decrease or a rate increase. And everything's kind of pointing now towards September probably being a decrease, and the first one we've had since like March of 2022.
Yeah, it's been more than 4 sessions that we haven't had a rate decrease. And after a while, I was beginning to think that Jerome Powell was just putting his heels in the sand and he was pushing back on Donald Trump just to be pushing back to say, hey, I've got some power here too. 2.7% is not quite 2%. Do you think that we'll even see 2% inflation rate here in the near future?
Well, I think that it's very possible that we could. As we look at layoffs and what's going on. And of course, Jeff, we're going to talk about AI here. That's artificial intelligence and what it probably means for the workforce looking forward and how that's going to affect unemployment rates and probably eventually affect this thing called universal basic income. But I really think one of the things that is not being talked about right now is, of course, our debt as a country. We have a lot of that, $36.5 trillion, I think the number is now, and how that's going to be affected as well. And people say, well, who owns our debt? So if I were to ask you that question, now I know you're more educated than most people, but if I were to ask you who owns our debt, what would your answer be?
Well, I think you're taking a leap of faith there and saying that I'm more educated than the average person. But I would say, and correct me if I'm wrong, I would say that the American people own this particular debt.
Yes, that's right. Most of it, probably 30 trillion of it, is owned by us, the citizens of the United States, and around 6 trillion or so is owned outside by China and probably 35 or 40 or 50 other countries that had money to invest to collect interest from us, right? So
right.
Now, granted, if we have to refinance debt, so how do we put debt in place? We issue treasury bonds, carry those on the balance sheet, and then issue that money out into the public and then agree to pay interest, right? Well, so when we were financing most of this debt that we have currently out there, we were financing that stuff at 1%, 1.5%. Under the new Fed funds rate, with Jerome Powell setting the bank rates at 4.25% right now to 4.5%, nobody wants to buy 1.5% debt. So if we issue treasury bills that are paying less than the current rate, people aren't going to buy them. So that's a problem for refinancing debt. So pressure is mounting upon Jerome Powell to lower interest rates, not only just because we think it's the right thing to do for the economy and job layoffs, but because we have to refinance so much debt.
And I'm sure that some people may be thinking, well, if we own all of this debt, we the American people, why can't we the American people just say, you know, you're a nice guy, I'm going to forgive this debt? I guess
Well,
we really just can't do that.
Let's just play that out for a minute. So, Jeff, let's say you own $2 million of 10-year treasury bills.
Would I like to forgive that? I'm not sure that I want to do that. No.
I'm not sure you're going to without a fight.
Of course not.
So, granted, that stuff's got to be paid back, but we need to do it at a reasonable rate. Now, of course, people say we're still stacking up more debt. And so how do we fix this conundrum that we're in where we're paying higher interest rates as this stuff is refinanced? We're also stacking more debt. One of the things that we haven't talked about for a while is Doge, and Doge has kind of fallen off the headline map, if you will. But we did cut some expense, and I think that that's going to play out pretty good. The tariff thing, everybody's up in arms about that. The tariff thing seems to be collecting us. The last number I saw was about $50 billion with a B dollars per month right now. So when you look at what Doge was able to cut, when you look at what we're maybe able to collect on tariffs, plus the fact that if we can be physically more responsible and grow our economy, if we can do those things, we can get out of this. There's a lot of people say, we just need to cut spending. Well, you can, but there's no way to cut enough spending to ever balance the budget. We're going to have to do a combination of cut interest rates, grow the economy, and then also control our spending. Those are the three things that have to happen to get this moving forward. Now, a lot of people would disagree with this, but I would say this, that Donald Trump has been trying to do those exact things. Now, you don't just go out and say, hey, we need to do this, we need to do that, we need to do this. You have to go behind the scenes and build a system that's going to support that. I used to lay sprinkler pipe before we would plant trees in the orchard. Well, we had to figure out how we were going to plant the orchard before we laid the sprinkler pipe, right?
Yeah.
So, and then the sprinkler pipe would feed the water that needed to go on top of those seedling trees to grow the orchard. And it's the same thing that Donald Trump is trying to do with our economy. And it's not just about, well, we need growth, let's get it. You've got to have the infrastructure to support what we need before we can go there. And I think we're getting there with all the repatriation of manufacturing and money coming back to the country. The tariffs to help balance trade. We've made the rest of the world's life possible for so long, and they really can't afford to not deal with us. They have to. We're 25% of the world's purchasing power. We're 4% of the world's population. Everybody needs to do business with us, and we're not trying to beat people up. We're just trying to get a fair shake.
Right, and it's a two-way street, and I think a lot of people forget that. We're talking with Randy Floyd, Floyd Financial Group. Our program, of course, is called Show Me the Money. Our phone number, 417-889-7233. If you hear anything that piques your interest today, you'd like to come and sit down and have an appointment with Randy or Jake Floyd here at Floyd Financial Group. I call it an appointment, but really it's just a casual conversation to get your questions answered about retirement, building wealth. It's not going to cost you a dime. No cost, no obligation, and no judgment. We'll meet you where you are. 417-889-7233. And, of course, we're online at FloydFinancialGroup.com. Randy, all the buzz these days, of course, is about artificial intelligence. I hear it in the news really pretty much every day, almost every hour. They're talking about AI. And you and I were talking off the air. This is really sort of like the Industrial Revolution. It really changed the way that people worked. And now, Industrial Revolution turned out okay. Do you think that the same prognosis applies here to AI, that if we just adapt to this, that everything's going to be okay and employment is not going to be affected?
Okay, so that's a heavily loaded question there. So let's back up and let's just talk about this for a minute. So I'm sure if you were a candlestick maker,
okay,
back before assembly lines, and the assembly line came along and put you out of business, you hated the Industrial Revolution.
Absolutely, yeah.
I mean, let's say in the 60s, if you were a vinyl record manufacturer, you had a great business.
You did?
Today, you're out of business. If you make cassette tapes a few years ago, you had a great business. CD-ROMs, all these things that we can look back over 8-tracks. Remember the 8-tracks where you had to,
sure.
after a little while, you'd have to put something in there to kind of wedge it up so it would track right.
I've still got one, Randy. I've still got one.
So all those things that have come and gone, they were great inventions for their time, and we had to move on. Now, AI, I have to be honest with you, scares me a little.
Yeah.
There's things that are going to come from it. Because here's what we know. Everything that man makes that is progress can be used for good and it can be used for evil. There's always somebody trying to figure out how to game the system. But AI, I think, overall is going to give us a lot of insight and a lot of opportunity if we can just figure out how to regulate it. I always go back to if I'm a machine and you're a machine and we're just having a logical conversation and I say to you, Jeff, this person over here, this human, is always causing us all of our trouble. How do we fix that? Well, we eliminate the human.
Yeah, exactly.
But, there's a lot of people that talk about this and they say, well, I can foresee the day where everybody will live in abundance and nobody will have a job.
How's that going to work?
Well, and that's the question, right? Well, they say if the machines can do all the work, they never need a day off, they don't have vacation. We don't even have to pay them, really. We just have to hire other machines or have machines in the system that will fix them when they break down. At some point, you have to have somebody that does something. But again, we look at the labor force, and it can be drastically pushed down. But the efficiencies that we may gain will probably lead us down the road to this thing called universal basic income. You and I have talked about this before. Whereas people don't have jobs, but we can gain efficiencies and profitabilities and things by using computers and robots and that sort of thing. We can probably prop up the general public. And we know this, and we're seeing this around the country right now. If you don't help prop up certain people, they'll just come take it from you at gunpoint, or they'll run into your Dillard store and take what they need and go resell it.
Yeah.
I mean, that's just kind of how it works.
They're doing that now, as a matter of fact. The police can't do anything about it in Los Angeles and different places like that. But
yeah, so it's one of those things that's going to come. But AI may also help us to deal with some of that.
yeah,
If you think about it, there's good and bad to everything. I'm just hopeful that we can kind of regulate it and keep our heads and use it for the advantage of mankind as much as possible.
right. Well, I use it for research, and there was a time before Chat GPT and so forth, and it wasn't that long ago that, I just used to scour the internet. Before the internet, we would scour all sorts of news sources, newspapers and magazines. We would look at encyclopedias and so forth. But I've embraced technology. I've embraced AI, Chat GPT, and it makes me able to do my job better. And I think that is going to be the future for people who want to remain gainfully employed, is to embrace this technology, take a look at what it can do, and see what part that you can play in its role to make it even better. I think there, at least for the time being, as far as I'm concerned, there's room for coexistence here between the AI and actual humans. But you were talking about AI and people breaking into the stores and how AI could solve that. And I was thinking RoboCop, wouldn't that be pretty cool? Gets out of the car and goes in there. And
The only challenge is when RoboCop gets hacked and comes to your door and says, "We think you're a criminal." Boom. No.
yeah, I didn't want to think about that part of it. But again, he was like the candlestick maker. I'm sure that probably, he could go to work in the candle factory and he could show them ways to make better candles and so forth and so on too. I think that, as I said, embracing technology is really the way to go. There's so much that we've covered here, but I do not want to end this segment, Randy, without talking about the markets. Still, they're kind of growing great guns. Do you see them going great guns here and ripping here for the rest of the year?
So there's always a few things pulling on that. So we'll talk about what those things are. Number one, if earnings continue to be good at companies, markets will continue to grow because that's what drives markets, is profitability and growth. Now, as we have layoffs come along, and this is part of the Industrial Revolution thing, it could be that we would have a situation where we have record profits as we're laying off people and having higher unemployment. And you go, well, how does that work? Well, again, it's going to be from the productivity gains that we get from AI. If you think about it, it was the same back when Henry Ford invented the assembly line. We had people that were making all these things onesie, twosie.
Yeah.
And of course, we had all kinds of new stuff from Henry Ford too, with the car and all that. But the wagon maker that used to go out and he'd cut the wood, saw the wood up, cure the wood, go to the blacksmith, or maybe he was a blacksmith as well. He had to bang the iron out on the anvil and with the billows and get it hot. I mean, as things change that way and people are unemployed, yet companies can still profit. You may remember this, back in the 70s and 80s, unions were a lot more prolific than they are today.
Right.
And I remember there was a few companies around town. I'll keep them nameless at this point because some of them are still in business. But it seemed like just every little bit they were on strike. The productivity was questionable. The other thing is, it seemed like the unions were always trying to get people to do less work and get paid more. There was a time that unions were needed because they needed to protect workers. And then it became the situation where we needed to protect the owners of the business from the workers, right?
Right.
And we're going to have the same thing in AI. And I think we're going to have some way to monitor and parse that out. And there's a book written by a guy named Richard Marvin DeVos called Compassionate Capitalism that was written many years ago, probably in the late 80s. And it's a good read for people because it talks about the fact that capitalism can be very harsh and very hard on people. But there's a side of it that's better, especially if people can have a heart and have some morals about what they do in business, But I think it's going to get interesting to watch what happens here. But I do think the market is still going to rally. We had $6.5 trillion of money printed during COVID-19. Back when Ben Bernanke was running things back in 2009 after the financial crisis, he printed $3.5 trillion. The market rallied between 2010 and 2020 before COVID, 425% from its low, which still puts you about 200% above where you were before the crisis over that 10-year period. And here this time we had $6.5 trillion. So what does that equal? The only difference being that interest rates are at 5% this time versus 0 during that time. But that money is going to find its way, like Ben Bernanke said back in 2009, to real estate and the stock market. So we haven't seen it happen or come to an end yet. I'm very, very optimistic about what's going to happen for the future.
Talking with Randy Floyd at Floyd Financial Group, and we've been talking about current events. Again, if you'd like to come and sit down, talk to us here at Floyd Financial Group, have a casual conversation with Randy or Jake. 417-889-7233 is the number that you will call in order to do that. You can do it today. Leave your name, telephone number. Ashley will call you back during the week and set up that appointment. Again, at no cost and no obligation. 417-889-7233. We're also online at FloydFinancialGroup.com. Randy, let's take a break. We come back here on Show Me the Money. We're going to be talking about the 5 pillars of a truly aligned financial plan when our program continues here on 104.1 FM KSGF, where Springfield comes to talk.
Ready for another helping of some more real money talk? Thought so. Now, here's another serving of Show Me the Money with your hosts, Randy and Jake Floyd, with Jeff Shade.
Welcome back, everybody. This is Randy Floyd. You're listening to Show Me the Money. And in this segment, we're going to be talking about the 5 pillars of an aligned retirement plan.
And Randy, what do you mean when you say a financial plan has got to be aligned? Why is that so important?
We're all looking for this outcome, or I think we should be, as we retire. If we're 65 or we're 70, we got to figure out maybe we're going to live to age 90. So we need to make sure that we have things set up to, number one, we don't run out of money, but number two, we have enough money, and number three, we plan for all those what ifs that come down the road that we don't know if they're going to happen or not. And then one thing I say around here all the time, people come in and this happened and that happened. Yeah, I say, well, we really don't know what a day will bring. But we have to always think about what happens if those horrible things, in some cases, or some of those great things do actually happen. So there's several things we need to talk about along that line, just to see how to set it up and maintain it, right?
Right. Well, when I think of a financial plan that is aligned, I think of many different sources of this financial plan. And as we were discussing, I think about the spokes of a bicycle or maybe gears in a car, something like that. If all of those gears are aligned, the teeth mesh with each other, then all of them do well. But if one of them is off a little bit, that's going to affect all the others. So let's talk about some of the things that need to be aligned in this financial plan. We talked about the 5 pillars. What's the first one that we want to pay attention to?
Yeah, so I would say, number one, people have to have investments of some sort, right? If they're going to take an income without spending all their principal down right away. And sometimes people say, well, how much of my principal should I be spending? Well, I would tell you that in my perfect world, we're not spending any of our principal, right?
In a perfect world, yeah.
Yeah, no, that's hard to get to a perfect world. There is no such thing. But if we look at the investment setup, we've got to look at what's our risk tolerance, how does that play out along with the client's goals, and what's the time horizon, and how long do they plan to live? Because I have people that come in and say, I'm 65 and I figure I'll be dead by the time I'm 75. And I say, well, what if you're not?
Yeah.
Do you want to be figuring out how to have bread on the table next week?
Yeah.
So we have to look at all of those things and build a system around something that is sustainable, because the investments that we use are going to be tied to their risk and their need and capacity for that risk, as well as protection for the future. So when we sit down and we look at how we invest money and what tools we're going to use, everybody's situation is different. Some people come in and they need a 7% income stream off their money to feel comfortable. Mm-hmm. Some come in, they need a 2% income stream to come in off their assets to become comfortable and live with the way they want to, because they have maybe a pension and they got Social Security and other incomes, or maybe they got rental income that they just don't need as much off their investment assets. So we have to meet everybody where they are. That's why we go through our 5 steps. Number 1 is discovery, getting to know people, understanding what their needs are, what drives them in retirement, and that helps us to have a starting point then as to what those investments look like, as well as asking all the questions about risk tolerance and how do you feel if the market goes down 10% and you're down 5, is that good? If the market goes down 10 and you're down 20, are you coming to shoot me? If the market's up 10 and you're up 15, but when it's down, you're down 20, how does that make you feel? So all those things come into play, because sometimes people come in and say, man, I just need to make a lot of money with my investments. Well, if you want to make really aggressive returns, you have to have aggressive portfolios, which means, yes, when things are good, things are going up great. But when things are bad, you better be ready to hang on for the ride for the downturn. But the good news is 70% of the time the market is up, 30% of the time the market's down. And if we look back historically, we always win long-term with the market.
That's right. As long as you've got time, market's a great place to be. If you don't, it could be a little bit iffy. These 5 steps that we're trying to align here, number 1 is going to be the investments. We want to make sure that those are aligned with our goals. Then we talked a little bit about risk and protection. Tax planning, that's a huge issue for retirees and business owners alike. What are some of the ways that tax planning gets neglected, and what can proper coordination really do for us?
So there's all sorts of things that can reach out to bite us. So number 1, if you retire before age 65 and you need to get health insurance outside of your company, how much money you make determines how much help you get buying your plan through the Affordable Care Act. So that's one thing we have to figure out. And so tax planning really comes into perspective there. What is my Social Security going to be? What is my pension going to look like? And then, of course, as we hit age 65, we also still have to look at this thing called IRMA. And basically, that's an adjustment for the amount of income that you have coming in. And that affects how much you pay for Medicare Part B and possibly for a drug card as well. So that's another type of tax. It's not the IRS, but it certainly is another type of tax because it costs you more. And then, of course, we have to look at what assets does the client own? Do they own CDs? Do they have a bunch of cash in the bank? Do we have Roth IRAs? Do we have just traditional IRAs and 401ks that are all taxable versus some of those not being taxable? And when we blend all those together, how do we arrive at the most income with the least amount of tax?
Talking with Randy Floyd at Floyd Financial Group. We're talking about an integrated financial plan, and we're talking about the tax planning aspect of that. Randy, I've heard these 0% tax bracket seminars where they want to get you to zero. It seems to me that if you make money, you got to pay taxes. So what is the strategy there, and why doesn't that work?
Yeah, so the idea, most of the money we see today when people come in to sit with us, they're sitting in 401ks, 403bs, IRAs, 457 plans if you work for a government or some type of municipality, right? And that money is mainly pre-tax. So the question that we get asked all the time is, well, should I consider doing a Roth IRA? So for those that don't know, a Roth IRA basically says I can take my pre-tax dollars, convert it to a Roth, or in today's world, I can fund the Roth on the front end and not have to do this conversion later. So I can do it where I don't get any tax benefit today as I put money into my Roth 401k versus a traditional 401k where I do get a reduced tax benefit today. But here's the thing. If you come in and you got, $1 million in a 401k and you want to convert it to a Roth, you have to pay the tax on whatever it is that you convert. Now, you never would want to go in and convert $1 million in 1 year because you're going to be in the maximum tax bracket. It's going to cost you, depending on the state you live in. Here in Missouri, it's going to cost you 42% under the current situation, which means, yes, you don't have any tax burden, but you also have 42% less money. And when it comes time to drawing out your income, if you were going to be drawing out money and you weren't going to be paying 42%, well, you paid the government too much money, right?
Right.
So the other thing is, as you're funding your 401k today, whether it be Roth or traditional, you have to look at what tax bracket am I currently in? People say, well, nobody can predict taxes in the future and they're always going to be higher. Well, that would be wrong because we're actually paying less marginally than we did then.
Right.
So that would have been a wrong assumption. So while we would like to think that we can say that and we could write that in stone, you just can't. So we have to look today and say, okay, if I'm in the 35% tax bracket today while I'm working, and I'm going to be in the 25%, or I'll tell you this much, a lot of people today are going to fall in the 12% tax bracket federally for most of their income. So why would I go out and pay 25 or 35 or 40% today in hopes to save 25% in the future? Now, that being said, if you have time and you want to do some Roth conversion and you do it over a 10-year period or so, that's a different story because now we can keep you in probably the same tax bracket that you're currently in and save you some money. Now, if you're going to be in a higher tax bracket now and we think we're going to be in a lower tax bracket later, it makes no sense to do the conversion. So I would just say this. Anytime somebody says, hey, you need to look at doing a Roth conversion, look at it, do the math, and we got calculators out here that show you straight up whether it's an advantage to you or not to do the Roth conversion. And so many times that's what people are talking about when they're talking about, okay, that doesn't even produce a 1099 when you take money out of the Roth IRAs. It's really slick and really great, but you got to look at what you had to pay up front to get that done. Secondly, there are people that are doing this with life insurance today where they say, hey, buy a cash value life insurance policy, let the cash value build up in there, take loans against that, and that's a loan and that's never taxable. The only thing is you did buy your life insurance policy with after-tax dollars, so you got to remember that. If you need life insurance coverage, great. If you don't need life insurance coverage, I'm not 100% sure that it's always the best move for people. Everybody's situation is different. The biggest thing I would say is if you want to talk about all these things, I'm more than happy to do it with your specific situation in mind.
417-889-7233 is the number to call if you'd like to talk to Randy or Jake here about tax planning. One of the important cogs in the wheel, of course, along with risk and protection and investments. Let's talk about legacy and estate planning. How does this go beyond just having a will, and why does it need to be a part of an overall integrated financial picture?
Jeff, as humans, we create horrible messes through life.
We do. Most people.
And so for some of us, our first marriage didn't work out. Maybe we had a spouse that died. There's all sorts of issues that come up. Maybe we got married again later in life and we have their children and our children and your children and my children and the combination thereof. And, maybe one side of the family is extremely wealthy and one is not.
Yeah.
And so we have all sorts of things that when it comes to estate planning and passing assets to people, we want to make sure we get it done right. We want to make sure we get it done efficiently. And letting the court system do it through a probate proceeding or a situation similar to that, or like a will, is just never the best way to go. The other thing I would say is using an estate plan, using a trust of some sort. We can plan for all the contingencies that may happen. Somebody dies out of order. You should never have to bury your children or your grandchildren, but it happens every day, Jeff, to people. It's very sad, but it does happen. And if we aren't careful, by the time some of those things happen, we may be old enough that we don't have the cognitive ability or would remember to make changes to a basic estate plan like a will or maybe beneficiary designations at the bank or on your IRA. So it's always good to have a document that's almost a living document that can catch those things, and we have a pre-plan in mind as to how to handle that in case all these really horrible, ugly things happen. The legacy planning is something that there's great opportunity there in some cases, and certainly there's a lot of safety to make sure that things go the way you want them to go, even after you're here, or you're incapacitated and you can't change it or help it.
And finally, Randy, for business owners, you've got to think about an exit strategy and what happens when those aren't aligned with the rest of the plan. So what's the danger of handling each of these areas that we talked about in isolation?
Yeah, we've talked about having a cohesive plan, and that's tax planning, investment planning, legacy planning. How do I transition the business? And all these areas sometimes can get very specific and isolated. You need somebody that's been around long enough and had enough experience that they can kind of be the quarterback to say, it's time to run the football. Oh, nope. We got to pass this time. Now we got to go up the middle. There's an opening over there. We got to have somebody that sees all of the possibilities and all of the pathways, if you will, to get done what you want to get done. It's kind of like here when we were transitioning this business from Lisa and myself to Jake and Elizabeth. We had a 5-year plan that we put into place, and it was based on legalities and things so that if something happened in the interim, we knew that that plan would be lived out and fulfilled. And then also you got to think about when you have succession planning for business owners and that sort of thing. What if somebody dies out of order? Does your wife want to be in business with your brother-in-law? All those different things that come up along the way. You need somebody that's had some experience with this stuff and can really look down the road and say, okay, if this happens, then we're going to do this. We got to look at all the stuff that can go wrong. Now, we love it when things go right, but not always do things go right. And so we need to make sure that we have looked at the tax planning, the partnerships, if you will, of people maybe in the future if you're trying to pass a business to family.
So it's a team approach here at Floyd Financial Group. We really have it all under one roof. And if that is what you want, someone who really talks to each other to make sure that your plan is integrated, that all the cogs in the wheel work with the other cogs, give us a call here at Floyd Financial Group. We'd love to talk to you. 417-889-7233 is our telephone number. You can make that call right now if you want. Leave your name, telephone number. Ashley will call you back during the week and talk about an integrated financial plan for you at no cost, no obligation, and no judgment. 417-889-7233. We're also online at floydfinancialgroup.com. Randy, let's take a break. When we come back, we're going to be wishing Social Security a happy birthday. We'll tell you how many years and more when our program continues here on 104.1 FM KSGF, where Springfield comes to talk.
We're back with your financial catch of the day, and it's a big one. Here's more Show Me the Money Radio with your hosts, Randy Floyd, Jake Floyd, and Jeff Shane.
Welcome back, everybody. This is Randy Floyd. You're listening to Show Me the Money, and in this segment, we're going to be talking about get your party hat on because Social Security just turned 90.
Yeah, she looks pretty good for 90 years of age, or does she? I don't know. It looks like she might have a limited lifespan here. But that's right. August 14th, 1935, President Franklin D. Roosevelt signed the Social Security Act into law. The country was in the middle of the Great Depression, and for the first time, Americans could look forward to a guaranteed income in their later years. So, Randy, I don't know how much you know about Social Security and the beginnings of Social Security, but when FDR signed that into law, there were a certain number of people that paid into Social Security for every person who was receiving it. Today, that number is a little bit more lopsided. Can you explain a little bit more about that?
Yeah, I'm trying to remember the exact number, but I think in the beginning there was 16 people paying into it for every one that was collecting. And I think today it's like 3 to 1.
Yeah.
Because there's so many people, 70 million or so people on Social Security, disability, or some type of income through that Title 19. So looking back, Ida Mae Fuller was the first one to get a benefit in 1940, and it was $22.54.
Right.
One of the things that I think is somewhat interesting, in the beginning, Social Security was to be paid at 65, right? Only later to get it changed to where you could take it at 62. But the life expectancy of the average American male in 1935 was 61.
So you paid it at 65, but you're only expected to live to 61. That's a pretty good plan right there.
It is a good plan. That's how you stack the deck, you know?
Yeah,
so, of course, today we can start taking at 62, or you can delay until age 70. But Social Security, we've heard this talk. In fact, I've heard it for the last 30 years that it's going broke.
Right.
And it always gets pushed out a little further, a little further, a little further. And of course, there's always adjustments each year. The government goes out and says, well, you got to pay Social Security tax on all your income up to, I think the number's 160,800 or something like that. The number changes every year. I can never keep track of it. And then you don't pay Social Security tax anymore. You always pay Medicare and Medicaid. That always comes out of each check that you earn. But, there's a lot of things they're going to do to keep it from going broke. I mean, I think it's possible that there will be benefit cuts in the future, and probably eventually there may be very little Social Security. But I think for people 55 and older, I don't think you're going to have to worry about not having a Social Security check.
So that's the myth number one that we want to talk about here. Actually, this segment is about myths about Social Security. The first myth is that Social Security is bankrupt. It's not going to be there. Now, for you and me, of course, Social Security is there. For people, as you said, mid-50s and above, it's going to be there. But let's talk about Jake. Jake is a young whippersnapper, 40-ish or so. And here's Trevor, who's 13 years of age. Do you think that they're going to have Social Security? And if they're going to have it, will it be radically different, do you believe?
Yeah, I think it'll be radically different if they have it. And I can't even begin to think what that might look like. But here's what I would say. We mentioned this earlier in the program. This thing called universal basic income is going to be a thing. Okay. And basic income is just when people can't work or won't work or whatever the situation is, their job is going to be, well, you're going to get paid to stay home. So I don't know what that's going to look like, but here's what I would say. If you are under 50 and you're looking for Social Security to fund your retirement, you need a new plan. You need to be thinking that through, because you don't want to get to 65 thinking it's going to be there and then it's reduced 30% or 50% from where it is. I don't have any crystal ball. It doesn't work, but I don't have any extra insight into that. I'm just telling you, though, if we look at how things are going and where money is flowing to, I think you need to be managing your investments and looking to grow a business and looking to figure out how to put as much money in your savings as you can right now today. Get it invested and get the returns. Einstein said, compound interest, the eighth wonder of the world. You need to be doing that.
Absolutely. Back in the 60s and 70s, I mean, my parents and aunts and uncles and so forth and grandparents, they could live quite handsomely off of Social Security. There are still some people right here in the last bastion of sanity who can do that. But on average, Randy, Social Security makes up what percentage of someone's overall income in retirement, would you say?
Probably 40% would be what I see around here as a number. Some people would tell you it might be 35. And there'd be some people that tell you it might be as much as 60, but I would say it's probably in the 40% range for most of the people we see.
All right. So Social Security going bankrupt, that is a myth. It could be radically different, but we'll have to wait and see. Myth number 2, you should claim benefits as soon as you can because it's going to be going bankrupt.
Well, there's a lot of situations that say, yes, you should take benefits at 62. Number one is you're sick and tired of being sick and tired. You just can't bear to go to work anymore. So that might be one reason. Number 2 might be your health, that you are in a situation where it is very hard, difficult, almost impossible for you to continue working. So that might be a reason to do it. The other reason might be you saved enough money. You have all the money you're going to need, and you just want the extra little money from Social Security that's going to be coming in. There's always the financial side of things, the dollars and cents, the math piece that says you should not take it at 62. But then there is the physical and the emotional side that says, yes, I should take it at 62. And we always have to help people walk down that path and explore that a little before they decide when they're going to take it. Now, ideally, if you knew the last day that you were going to draw your last breath, we could tell you exactly when to take Social Security to optimize exactly how much you got out of it for what you paid in.
So taking it at 62 is tempting. And Randy, in your experience, how many people percentage-wise take it at 62?
I would say that we probably have roughly 50% that take it at 62.
All right. Yeah, I did the calculations and I wouldn't want to take it at 62 because your benefits are pretty much reduced by a significant amount. What is it, like 30% or so?
Yeah, it's a significant amount, probably around that 30% mark is what you're looking at. It's at least 25. By waiting later and taking it at age 70, which I don't know that I could ever tell somebody, hey, you need to work and wait till age 70 to take it. We have some people that are doing that, especially if you have a job that is not just physically demanding and it's not something that you just hate and you're making a good wage, I don't know, you might want to work until age 70 and maximize that benefit. I have a gentleman right now that's going to get over $4,000 a month by waiting until age 70. And then his wife has like a $2,000. Well, they got a $72,000 income before any of their investments.
Right.
So for a lot of retirees, they can live pretty comfortably on that because they don't have any debt. They don't have any bills. They own their home, and you got cars once in a while to buy, and you may have some healthcare expense, but they can do pretty well on that. I have some people, believe it or not, I had a couple in here just a few days ago. They're living really good on $3,800 a month.
Wow.
So, but again, we're right here in the last bastion of sanity, Springfield, Missouri. Rock on.
Yeah, there are a lot of benefits to living in a place like this. It doesn't cost as much to live, and I think people are pretty grounded in this part of the country, too. Not a lot of really world travelers. But anyway, we're talking about myths here about Social Security and wishing Social Security a happy 90th birthday. Next myth is you lose your benefits if you keep working. Well, that's not exactly true, but those benefits are reduced. Can you explain that?
Yeah, well, basically what happens is if you're not to full retirement age of 67, the number changes every year on this too. I think it's 23,000, let's call it, or about, $1,800 a month that you can make and not have to pay any of your Social Security back. Now, if you're full retirement age that year, go ahead and make all the money you want to make beyond full retirement age and collect your Social Security. But if you're going to work and make a substantial amount of money, then by all means, you should just wait to file until your full retirement age. I did that because for me, my full retirement age was 66 and 6 months. And I knew that I would continue to have a role here and do some work here, and that I would have to just pay the government back for what I collected if I took it sooner than that. So everybody's situation is different. If you are 55 and older and you don't have a good solid plan as to how you're going to retire and when you're going to do it, we should start talking about that now so that you have time to do the Roth conversions, to figure out when you want to take Social Security, to figure out how am I doing on my investments and how does that align with my future and the retirement plan that I want to live.
Once again, if you'd like to talk to Randy about Social Security or Jake when he's in the office, 417-889-7233 is our number. No cost, no obligation. Just a casual conversation. You can make that call right now if you want. It's 417-889-7233. Leave your name and telephone number. Ashley will be right back in touch with you and set up that appointment. Myth number 4, Social Security covers all your retirement needs. We talked about that a little bit. Not even close. Average benefit as of the recording of this program, around $1,900 a month. Enough to help, but not enough to live on comfortably for most people. Myth number 5, there's nothing that you can do to increase your benefits. Not exactly true.
No, that's really not true at all. I mean, if you want to pay more in, you will get more out. Now, I will say this, you don't get as much as you get up the food chain in earnings as you do when you're more in the middle of what I would call the middle class worker. But you can work longer to increase. You can also coordinate spousal benefits. I have a lady that's doing this. Unfortunately, her husband passed away. And so when she turned 60, she went ahead and filed, and she has a widow's pension, or basically the Social Security check that she gets off her husband. But she's working now, and her benefit's going to be greater. So she's going to wait until she turns 67 to turn hers on and get the maximum benefit. So there's a lot of things that can be done because she can refile later because she gets that widow's pension until that time. So a lot of things that can be done to increase your Social Security benefit. Just waiting. There are some people that have done well in life and they have enough savings and enough investment income that they don't need to turn their benefit on until age 70, and they can live out of their retirement savings and then all of a sudden get a $3,000 or a $4,000 bump when they hit age 70 in their retirement plan, and of course slow down on their investments if they want to.
So here's the takeaway, Randy. After 90 years, Social Security is still a cornerstone of retirement, but it's just one piece of the puzzle. The more you know and the more you plan, the more you can make this program work for you. So happy birthday, Social Security. And here's to busting myths for the next 90 years. Talking with Randy Floyd, Floyd Financial Group. Again, our number, 417-889-7233. If you'd like to have a casual conversation about Social Security or anything else that applies to your journey towards a confident retirement. Randy, let's take a break. When we come back here on Show Me the Money, we're going to be talking about retiring early. That is a hot topic when our program continues here on 104.1 FM KSGF, where Springfield comes to talk.
People of the Ozarks, step away from the fishing pole and prepare to be shown the money, because we're back with more straight talk and honest answers with Randy Floyd, Jake Floyd, and Jeff Shea
Welcome back, everybody. This is Randy Floyd. You're listening to Show Me the Money, and in this segment, we're going to be talking about the American dream of retiring early.
It's my dream. I didn't do that, Randy. I'm still working, but let's dive into this hot topic, retiring early. If you've ever dreamed about leaving the workforce beyond the traditional retirement age of 65, we might have a roadmap that you can use to help you along that way. So retiring early sounds amazing, but it can also feel overwhelming, Randy. What's the first step that Floyd Financial Group recommends for someone thinking about early retirement?
Well, the first thing, if you were going to plan a trip, and retirement is kind of a trip, right? Because you've arrived at the end of work, and now you're going to follow the map through retirement. So if you were going to go somewhere, you have to first know where you are. So
sort of like MapQuest. Where are you? Where do you want to go?
That's right. If you're in St. Louis but don't know it, how do you get to Kansas City, right?
Right.
It's pretty simple once you can see the highway, because I-70 runs right over there. But
you bet.
The thing I would say about that is it's true. You have to kind of sit down and do an assessment of, number one, what's important to you? How do you see retirement working for you? What is going to be your pastime, your passion? What are you going to do that's going to replace the 40 plus hours that you worked, plus the 2 hours per day of prepping to go home and get to work and eating?
Right.
I mean, you got a lot of time to fill there.
You bet.
And so we need to figure out what all those things are and what's it going to cost and how are we doing, and can we generate that income from Social Security, pension, and investments?
As you said, the first thing is to assess where you are financially, also assess where you are personally. Some people are just sick and tired of being sick and tired, and they can't think of anything else other than retiring. So you got to look at your financial situation, as you said, your income, your expenses, your savings, and your debt, so we know exactly where you stand. Going into retirement, if you're retiring early, Randy, would you suggest that you have no debt, or is a mortgage still going to be okay?
Again, we talked about this earlier. There is the financially correct answer to that.
Right.
And then there's the emotional answer to that. So case in point, when I got ready to kind of pull back here and not work every day in the business, my wife said, well, when you retire, I don't want us to owe 1 red cent on anything ever again. And I said, but honey, it doesn't really make financial sense for me to pay off a 2.9% mortgage. And she said, I don't care.
She didn't care. For her, a paid-off mortgage is the status symbol that replaces the BMW in life. I understand what you said.
Security or whatever it was.
Right.
And so after being married 43 years and wanting to continue to be married, I said, okay.
We'll do it.
So the emotional side outplayed the financial side. Now, not always is that the case. And in the scheme of things, it was something that made her feel good, and it was not that big a deal at that point in time. Sometimes there's deals that are just too big, and you can't really approach it that way. But I would say this, after we kind of look at where we are, we have to really figure out, does what I want to do, is it supportable, and can it be supported by what I have done so far? And here's the thing, too. A lot of times people come in and say, hey, I want to retire early. They're at the point in life where they're making the most money they've ever made.
Right.
Their kids are grown. They don't have much debt. They can put more into their 401ks and that sort of thing. And everybody's situation is different, but let's just say this. We've got to make sure that we've taken the time to dot all the I's, cross all the T's, and know exactly where we're at. Know that we're in St. Louis and know where Kansas City is, and we can get there.
Another reason that people decide that they need to work until 65, maybe not retire at 63, and maybe they've got, I don't know, we talked about this client that we had here, $8 million, and says, I'm going to work until 65 because I can't afford the health benefits. I'm going to lose my health benefits if I quit working. Well, you've got $8 million. I think you could afford that. What's a year of your life worth? We've actually had clients who have decided that they needed to work just for the health benefits.
Yeah, and that's an interesting concept. I mean, sometimes it's just, there can be a lot of change with thinking about retirement. And sometimes people really realize how big a change it is, and some don't realize it until they go, whoa, this is a big change, after they've gotten there. And of course, part of my job is to help them realize and understand exactly what they're doing and how it's going to play out. Many times people will come back and they'll say, well, one thing we didn't talk about at our first meeting was, how do I get my paycheck? I said, well, we'll direct deposit it into your bank account each month. Oh, And we can even withhold the taxes. You can?
Yeah.
So there's a lot of things that people don't think about. And also healthcare is one of those. How does Medicare work? How does the Medicare Advantage plan work? What about taxes? How do I pay them? When do I pay them? Do I have to pay an estimated? I've never had to do that because I always worked for an employer and they paid the taxes for me. But now that I don't have a mortgage, do I need an escrow account at the bank? Well, no. And how do I pay my insurance on the house? How do I pay my property taxes? All the things that you used to do through your mortgage lender, right? That you don't really do anymore. And of course, healthcare is the big one. How can I really plan for the potential long-term care that I might need in the future?
Right. And what we do here at Floyd Financial Group, I call it giving someone proof and permission. So we're going to prove to you that you can retire here 2 years early, and then we're going to give you permission in order to do it. Case in point was the health care and the gentleman who wanted to wait the 2 years so he could get health insurance. And I said earlier, what is a year of your life worth? We backed it up and said, okay, how much is a year of health insurance for you and your wife? Let's say that it's $24,000 a year. Is your life worth $24,000 a year? Of course it is. For 2 years,
Right.
worth $48,000. Can you afford it? We've given you proof. You've got millions of dollars. Of course you can do that. So again, it's proof and permission. And that is a client that, there's a sort of client, many of our clients do this, but they walk out the door just walking on air because we've given them proof and permission. Again, our phone number, 417-889-7233. If you'd like to talk about retiring early, you want proof and permission. You mentioned taxes. Taxes is a big part of retiring early. How do we minimize our taxable events in retirement?
Yeah, so everybody's situation is different. Some people, when they come in, what they have is a 401k and they got $1 million in it. Well, if I got $1 million in a 401k and I start drawing income, everything I take out of there is going to be taxable. And I can't do anything about that. Also, Social Security, depending on what your income level is, whereas a married couple, if it's $34,000 and up or $44,000 and up, I can't really control that unless I have assets that I can change how the taxability works there. But in many cases, people have CDs. They have regular investments outside of 401ks and retirement plans. Maybe they have rental properties, land they want to sell. They have inheritance, all those different things. And all those are treated differently for tax purposes. And what we look at is we look at all the sources of potential income that you have, and we try to engineer the lowest sustainable tax rate that we can based on what you need to retire and live out your retirement dreams.
So retiring early involves a lot of different things. Chief among them, of course, is going to be taxes. We did talk about health care. We talked a little bit about income planning. Is this something that, let's say I come into you and I'm 62 and I want to retire early. Do you just come up with a plan, set it and forget it? Or is it always sort of an evolving process, sort of like hitting a moving target?
Yeah, it's always hitting a moving target. And so we have to figure out, based on how fast the target is moving, how much lead to give it, right?
Right.
So it's one of those things that, depending on how a person is positioned, their risk tolerance, the amount of money they've saved, what they need for their retirement to be comfortable, all those things come into play as to how we build portfolios. And then we have to respond to changing economic conditions as they happen along the way. And that's kind of where we earn our money, is trying to figure out how to navigate all these things for people and keep people safe and keep them retired once they get retired and not looking over their shoulder worried about it.
One final question about this before we wrap this segment, Randy. What's one key question that you think our listeners should ask themselves when considering early retirement planning?
Yeah, I don't know if I can keep it to one or not. I think I have to keep it to two. Number one would be this: am I really ready? What am I going to do when I retire? And then number two is, do I have the wherewithal to pay for the lifestyle I want to live now, early retirement? Do I have that? And the only way you're going to find that out is to come in and sit down with us. Let's talk about your situation and figure out what you want to do. Let's put some numbers to it, and let's figure out where we are.
Right, and that's the financial part of it, but there's also the non-financial part of it that we've talked about as well, too. It's who you are, what your purpose in life is. When you're working, you're an accountant, you're a lawyer, you're a butcher, a baker, candlestick maker, but when you retire, it's something different. It's like, who am I? What am I going to do? Do you have a story at all, or has it ever happened that maybe a wife has confronted you or a spouse and said, you got to help me, he or she's driving me crazy, they just don't know what to do with themselves?
Yeah, I have a couple of ladies that I go to church with that also, they have, over the years, they have become clients, and they say, hey, yeah, be calling me if you want to go play golf.
Please call him.
So we know. So yeah, I mean, there's some of that where the transition takes a little time for some people. And then I have some people, they hit the ground running in retirement and they never look back. In fact, I have to call them if I'm ever going to hear from them.
Right.
So everybody's a little different. The good news is we're here to meet people where they are and help people of all levels, all walks of life, from wherever they come from, to help meet the challenge of living a good, healthy, long retirement.
Well, Randy, you're not in full retirement. I want to specify to people that if you do call 401-789-7233, Randy is still in the office. You're just not in the office as much as you used to be. It's sort of a gradual retirement. How have you decided to fill your time now that you don't have to spend as much time in the office?
So I'm a little bit unique, I guess, in some ways. I have a lot of activities that I enjoy doing. I picked up a new sport here recently, too. My daughter started playing pickleball.
Wow, didn't know it.
And so I played pickleball for the first time here a couple of weeks ago. I play golf a lot. I fish a lot. I don't hunt much anymore, but I do ride bikes, I swim, and I run. And then I also have 9 grandchildren now that kind of keep me busy. And so generally speaking, I don't have any trouble filling my days. In fact, what I have to do is make sure I plan my fun time in, and then everything else fills in just fine.
Well, you get up early enough in the morning that you've got a pretty full day if you're up 4 or 5 o'clock in the morning. So that's impressive that you can fill an entire day. I would imagine that before you stopped working full time, that you thought about what you were going to do in retirement and included at least most of these things.
Yeah, and it did. And kind of living it now, I would tell people that, is it awesome? It's absolutely awesome. Do I like coming in here still and keeping my hand kind of in the business here a little bit? And I would say absolutely I do. I love seeing the people here still that we've had as clients, some for 20 plus years now. Of course, all along the way, every year we meet new people that have had new clients come on board. For me, it's a really comfortable place to be. And I'll probably hang around for a little while longer until Jake may run me off eventually.
I don't think he's going to do that. We love having you both there. What you have, I call a hybrid retirement, in that you've retired to some extent, but yet you still keep your hand in it. And that's something that retirees could do. Maybe you've worked a job or you've had a business for a long period of time. Go ahead and retire, but you can keep your hand in it by consulting or whatever makes you happy. Maybe you go into another type of business doing something that you always like to do. In your case, you like to ride bikes, so maybe you retire from one thing and you go to work at a bike shop, or maybe you start a bike shop, repair shop, something like that. If you really think about it, you can find things to do in retirement that is really going to fulfill you, but find out who you are and then retire to something, not from something. Talking with Randy Floyd, Floyd Financial Group. We've had a fantastic show today, Randy. For those people who have missed it, we're also a podcast. Go to wherever you get your podcast. You can also go to Google and search Floyd Financial Group Show Me the Money. You'll find this show and all of our past shows, so you can stay on top of a prosperous journey towards a confident retirement. Well, Randy, we're out of time for this week. I want to thank you for your time, but most importantly, I want to thank our great listeners for joining us here in the last bastion of sanity, Springfield, Missouri. So for Randy Floyd, I'm Jeff Shade, wishing you a great weekend. Thank you for joining us. Be sure to join us again next week right here with another edition of Show Me the Money on 104.1 FM KSGF, where Springfield comes to talk.
The information provided in the preceding program is for educational purposes only and is not intended as investment advice for any individual or entity. All information contained herein is believed to be from reliable sources. However, we make no representations as to its completeness or accuracy. The opinions expressed are subject to change without notice and do not constitute financial, legal, or tax advice. Please consult your financial professional before executing any financial strategy. Financial planning is offered through Floyd Financial Group, LLC, an SEC registered investment advisor.